I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. I'm very appreciative today of the action of the Board of Legislators in passing enabling legislation so that we can implement our Westchester County Property Taxpayer Protection Act, which was signed yesterday by Governor Cuomo after both houses of the state legislature approved that legislation in April and then again in June. This is an important act because it has multiple elements to it, and it should be seen in its entirety, not merely as a singular action. Westchester County's finances were reviewed by the state controller very early in our administration in 2018. It's the subject of an ongoing audit by O'Connor Davies on an annual basis, and we've also had stress reports from the state controllers that has looked at the status of our county finances, and in each case, along with the rating agencies that determine what our bond rating is, indicated that we needed to have stable sources of revenue on an ongoing basis, that we could not balance the county budget based on one-shots, based on revenues that came from specific actions rather than from a steady stream of revenue. County governments have two major streams of revenue, property taxes and sales taxes, and then a host of secondary levels of revenue. Westchester County's budget at $1.9 billion is probably 65 to 70% state mandated expenses. Most recently, the implementation of Raise the Age is an example of that, where the state government has a priority and a policy, and in the act of implementing it does not necessarily add money to the county's responsibilities to implement it. The Early Voting Act that was passed earlier this year is another one, where we estimate about a $3.5 million cost to Westchester County without any particular revenue to attach to it. So we needed to stabilize our county finances, and that's what this act is about today. The component pieces of this are that right now we have, by dint of this act signed into law, we now have sales tax parity across Westchester County. That's an important thing to understand. The cities of Westchester County were already at 8 3/8 or higher. Mount Vernon, White Plains, New Rochelle, and Yonkers is actually higher than that at 8 5/8. New York City is above that number, so is Long Island. Rockland and Putnam are also at 8 3/8. So the rest of Westchester County was at 7 3/8. By creating parity, it means if you buy something in Wacabuck, it's the same sales tax as it is in White Plains. If you buy something in Newcastle, it's the same sales tax as you would pay in New Rochelle. If you buy something on Route 6 in Mahopac, it's the same sales tax as you would pay for a purchase on Route 6 in Somers. It's parity. That parity will allow for additional revenue to the county, and we have constructed a 30% share back to the local municipal governments, all of the villages, all of the towns, and two of the small cities, Rice City and Peekskill, and the school districts that correlate to those municipalities. So excepting the four major cities, which have their own sales tax authority and revenue stream, all of the other local governments will benefit from this additional revenue. And the taxpayer, property taxpayer, will benefit from this revenue. It is our sworn intent to submit a budget to the Board of Legislators this year that will freeze county property taxes, same property tax levy for 2020 that we have operated under 2019. And that freeze applies to everybody in the county, including the four cities. So there's a benefit in that particular situation for all of those individuals. In addition, in the allocation of money that we have, we are going to eliminate any of the one-shot financing that were part of this budget. Quite debated an issue about transferring county parking lot that sits on park land at the county center. That program will not go forward. And there are some other one-shots that we're also going to eliminate as part of the process. And we look forward to not needing one-shots in the future to balance the budget. We intend to put a defined amount into our reserve fund for this year, 2019, and as well, we'll make a commitment for what we're going to put in the budget, which will be announced in November, but we'll announce that number now so that the rating agencies will see that there's a consistent commitment now to start to restore our fund balance, and we believe that's the fastest way for us to restore our credit rating. We're at a AA1 with a negative outlook, and we want to see that improve, and we believe we can improve it with this action. We also think that this is a matter of progressivity, not regressivity. Most people who study these things, I have a master's degree in public administration, so we went through this in a course, which you forget until you have to pull it out to use it in a public position. But generally speaking, sales taxes are regressive. Property taxes are more regressive, meaning your ability to pay does not correlate to what you have to pay it for. The most progressive taxation is income tax, where you pay proportionate to what your income is. The county does not levy income tax. That's beyond our ability to deal. So we deal with the two revenue streams of sales tax and property taxes. This sales tax, which is generally seen as a regressive tax in general compared to an income tax, is already being paid by the largest concentration of poor people in this county. The high concentration of poor people are in Mount Vernon. They're in Yonkers. They're in New Rochelle and White Plains. That's the highest percentage of poor people. They're already paying 8 3/8. So what we're saying is the wealthier portion of this county will now rise up and pay an equivalent amount. And the money that it goes for in running the county government provides services that are generally directed to the poor and the middle class. When you look at the county government, what do? We provide a bus system, primarily used by the poor and middle class. We provide social services, primarily used by those who are poor. We have public health clinics in White Plains and Yonkers distributing free flu shots and so forth, provided primarily for those who are poor. A host of different services. So now the revenue base to pay for those items will be paid proportionately by those who are wealthier, living in those communities of this county that are wealthier. So the argument concerned about progressivity does not apply in this case because the poorest people in the county are already paying the higher number. I don't want to go on and on. We'll go to questions. I think it's important to understand this as a totality. If this is reported as, oh, they increased taxes, then that's a part of the story, and that would be an unfair part of the story because of how the whole thing fits together. And if we deliver, as I expect we will, on our commitment on property taxes, this will be a net benefit to the people of Westchester County. You only pay sales taxes on what you consume. If you don't buy something, you don't pay a tax on it. But you pay taxes on your property regardless of how you use it. That bill will come in. It's not a negotiable amount. You can't adjust it. So therefore, protection of the property tax levy is the more important priority that we face as a county government. Next Monday, July 8th, we will have a press conference at the Greenburgh Town Hall. It will involve members of the state legislature, the county legislature, local government officials, and we're going to lay out the specifics of how we're going to implement all these things that I've just talked about in concept. We invite you to be there for that. You'll be able to interview a host of different people. This proposal has bipartisan support. It had bipartisan support at the municipal government level. We've had Republican and Democratic town supervisors and village mayors in support of this. At the Board of Legislators, we had bipartisan support between Republicans, plural, and Democrats on this. In the state legislature, we had bipartisan support in the Assembly and of course, at the Senate level. The governor has signed it into law. We believe this is the right step forward. The last time something of this magnitude was done, when I first became a legislator, was done by a Republican county executive, Andy O'Rourke, and it led to a series of tax-freeze budgets that occurred back in the 1990s. So we believe we're following a traditional path, and we think we're on the right path, and we're happy to take your questions.
Just
Michelle?
a little bit again about the share back, the percentage that the municipalities will be getting.
Of all the new revenues, Michelle, that this will generate, this additional revenue will be 30% of it is going to be shared back to local governments and school districts. 20% number will be shared back to the local governments, the general governments, 10% to the school districts. The formula is based on population, and next Monday when we meet to have the implementation press conference, we'll give you a chart that will show you how much. Greenburgh will get more than at the top end than Pound Ridge will get at the bottom end because of the relative populations of those communities. And the school district involvements will involve all of the school districts of Westchester County with the exception of the 4 major cities because the sales tax generated from those 4 cities are not part of the revenue stream. So the revenue stream that we have are generated from within the remaining jurisdictions and therefore will be shared back to school districts and to governments. The 20-10% cut, 20% to 10% cut, was on the basis that the state has continued to give additional school aid to schools, but they have stopped giving additional aid to general governments. Local towns, villages, and cities are not getting additional AIM money, that's the name of the state aid program, year over year. So all of the towns and the villages and the 2 cities are frozen year after year after year. So we felt that to do right by them, we would give them a greater share of this. And this will enable, this village and that town to consider whether they can freeze local property taxes or whether they can use the money to deal with unmet capital. We all talk about driving on roads that are bumpy and potholed wherever we go. And the county has a responsibility for county roads. The greater number of roads that we drive on are local roads. And so those municipalities may choose each individual one on their own to put money into capital projects. This gives them some additional revenue that they had no other source for. So that's the 20-10 split out of the 30%. If you estimate over the course of a year, very general numbers, we expect in a full year, counting December, $140 million. And so 30% of that would be $42 million would be the share back that would go to the locals. And then of the 42 million, you divide that into 2/3, 1/3 to get the aggregate number for general governments, and then the third of that number, which would be 14 million to the school districts.
In addition to balancing the county's finances, what role did the SALT tax cap play in your push for this?
Well, I think a very important role. People will talk a little bit about, well, you're raising my taxes. The single biggest raise of taxes that have occurred to Westchester residents, without question, has been the loss of the SALT deduction, by a lot. You might find that your village raised taxes 2%, and it has an impact of $20 or $30 a year on you. The county's not going to raise taxes, but were the county to do that, that might be a $40, $50 impact. The SALT deduction, for many people, thousands of dollars of impact. And what it leans us to do is to figure every way we can to try to stabilize, hold the line on the property tax burden, because if you're paying over $10,000 now, you're going to get the same $10,000 deduction. I personally think that's a law that needs to be reversed. That will require different decision makers in Washington, D.C. to do that. But in the meantime, we cannot undo the mandates that we have. 65, 70% of our budget is mandated. The county itself cannot say, we're not going to pay Medicaid. We're going to cut that out in order to reduce property taxes so dramatically that it offsets the impact of SALT. Can't be done by a local government, not by a county, not by a city, not by a town or a village. So we're doing the next best thing. We're going to stabilize our finances, but we're going to do it responsibly. Now, you could deliver zero property tax increases. You could even cut taxes a little bit. But if you do it because you've sold off playland, or you've sold off the airport, or you've had one-shot sales of land, if you've done it because you have deferred paying for pension payments and the chickens come home to roost with interest attached to it, it's not a responsible way to do it. And that is exactly what the county was scored on in fiscal policy by the state controller's office, and separate and distinct by the bond rating agencies. So that's why when we talk about being able to have no increase in property taxes, we're doing it on the basis of having the revenue to run the government that we're mandated to have, and doing it in a responsible way.
Did you say, how much were you going to replenish the fund bond?
Michelle, we haven't set a number yet, but by next Monday we'll have those numbers in place. How much we intend to put in for this year. What we have to do, the reason why we don't have those numbers today, is we have to make sure that our budget department is in a position to make an honest estimate of what they think sales tax will generate, and then be conservative on that number. When they can lock in on a firm number, then we'll be able to say, well, X million out of that number of additional revenue can go to the reserve fund, because some of it will have to cover some of the commitments I've made. If we're not going to do the transaction on the parking lot, that's a $23 million cost to the county. We budgeted the budget with that as a $23 million revenue. If you don't do that action, then $23 million of what we've just generated will go to balance the budget in lieu of that. And so when we look at how much money we expect to get as a county, and then how much of it will go to take care of those commitments we've made, then we'll know how much we have to put in the reserve fund. But we'll be number specific next Monday, and we'll also be number specific in terms of the budget. By next week, I expect to give you copies of executive orders and directive memos to various operating departments. I mean, they all know it's coming. But something specific that you can put in your hands, and you'll see, yes, they're serious about this. I don't like making commitments that I can't keep. I'm trying very hard. When we say we're going to open the Sprain Ridge pool, we did. And we're hoping to open the other one. We believe it's going to be open by the end of July. We mean it. When we say we're going to have a new ride and playland, we say we're going to fix a Miller House, we say we're going to do 74 units of housing at West Help, we say we're going to fix Memorial Field, we mean these things. People are looking to make sure that we're going to be good to our commitments. So by next week, I should be able to give you a hard commitment. And believe you me, it's important for you and the public to know that. It's real important for the bond rating agencies to know that. Fitch and S&P and Moody's are going to want to know that this county government is moving in a different direction, and they mean it. And so we intend to make those things real. Any other questions? Thank you for your time. You're very gracious. Appreciate it.